Welcome to the Functional Nurse Podcast, where we explore how nurses are transforming healthcare through functional medicine and nurse-led innovation. I'm your host, Brigitte Sager, founder of the Institute for Functional Nursing. Here, we're reclaiming our role as healers and leaders, one root cause conversation at a time. Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Functional Nurse Podcast. My name is Brigitte Sager, and I'm your host. Today, our topic is top 7 challenges that nurses are facing when they are helping to support patients through an elimination diet. And I thought this was a really timely topic because I know a lot of people in the new year are really focused on wellness and taking some more drastic measures to support their health. And I know that a lot of nurses are aware of the benefits of the elimination diet, but also maybe aware of the challenges, maybe not. In theory, it sounds pretty straightforward, but in practice, sometimes there can be some caveats that I thought it would be great if we discussed. And from the functional approach, we consider the elimination diet to be the gold standard of how we approach food reactions. And with that being said, the goal of this episode isn't to teach the elimination diet or the food reactions behind that. The overview there is that, there's a lot of confusion for patients around food reactions. And in reality, we have 3 types. We have true food allergies, we have food intolerances, and we have food sensitivities. An elimination diet is identifying food sensitivities. A lot of nurses I've trained have learned about the benefits of using the elimination diet in their practice to help calm the symptoms that patients are experiencing, help them to heal and improve their health drastically. But there are some things that come up when they're working with patients that are almost universally challenging. That's what I really wanted to talk about today. The first thing that I wanted to mention is timing. That one I think is the most important one. When I've worked with patients and encouraged them to do an elimination diet, the top of my list is figuring out when they will be most successful. And by that, I mean that, we have the half-life of food. We know how long to do an elimination diet for. We're educating our patients on this, but then we are also needing to create space for them to actually be successful. And what I find in practice is that often nurses and their patients will think of the time frame they're eliminating the food for, which in a lot of common scenarios might be 3 to 4 weeks. And they may look at their calendar and say, great, let's get started. Or they're extremely motivated. They've started working with a nurse and they're ready to get started. That does not mean that right now is the best time. I often tell my students, if you're working with somebody in October, have a conversation about the holidays and what that means to them, what's coming up for them as far as times that might be more challenging, where they won't be able to control as much around like what foods they'll be exposed to. And in the holiday season, that in particular can be challenging if people are trying to go to social events or if they are attending family events. Through the year, there can be other versions of this. For example, if somebody has a big vacation coming up and they have maybe less control over their diet, if they're going to be eating out a lot or traveling, if somebody has a celebration that might in their mind really warrant cake and ice cream, then maybe that being on the calendar means that the elimination diet being moved out a little bit would set them up for success. And we want them to be successful. There is not too much to be gleaned from an elimination diet that only lasts a few weeks and then adding foods back in too early. And typically when that does come up, it isn't about like adding in one thing. It is typically like I just mentioned, like a celebration with cake and ice cream. Now we have all of these foods reintroduced and we kind of need to start again from scratch. And that can be really frustrating for patients. It can be really demoralizing for them. Making certain that there is space for that to occur is important. But what is even more important there is to make certain that they understand that not just the time eliminating foods, but the time reintroducing foods is also important. I have often had patients that set aside that time, but not considering the fact that the reintroduction period is essentially an experiment and we're reintroducing one food at a time and that is in a controlled way. They need to make time for or include consideration for that time as well. And I think that in itself is the most challenging thing that I see patients struggle with and nurses maybe not including in their education to initiate an elimination diet and then having some frustration on both ends. Number 2 would be focusing on what they can't have. You'll notice if you introduce the idea of an elimination diet, the benefits of it, how it connects to their health story and what you hope for them and their outcomes, they might really be focused on what they won't be able to eat. And luckily, it's a short-term thing. It isn't like a permanent food plan, but the thing that I think can be really useful here is to focus on the shopping list. Like if you're using the IFM toolkit, they have a front and back page that is essentially a shopping list, and that is what I have always used with my patients as like a guide, because people can get really caught up in the details or like they really wish that something was on the list. And you'll get a lot of messages between visits where it's like, hey, I looked at this. Can you read this label? XYZ. And I think that from the beginning, being extremely clear that if it's on that list, eat it. If it's not on that list, do not eat it is the best approach that I have come up with. And I think it's really been helpful for my students as well to just focus on what you can have. Kind of like when we're trying to improve somebody's diet, we want to focus on adding more versus like excluding things. But in this case, it's short term. It is a really critical thing that is going to improve their health significantly if food sensitivities are at the root of their health concerns or part of the root of their health concerns. I think that the framing that and keeping it as simple as possible is really important. Number 3 would be people having a period of feeling worse while working through the elimination diet. I try to frame this as like evidence that we're on the right track, like that, maybe their gut is kind of like giving off some signals that the bad guys aren't getting fed as well as they were in the past, for example. There is that potential for people to feel poorly at some point in their journey through the elimination diet. And that can often be a good thing. If you have learned how to use an elimination diet in your practice, you already understand that. I would say, like, the thing about that whole concept that I think is really important is making sure patients know that that might happen and that it's normal and what to do if it happens. And that is where I see, like, the breakdown there is patients maybe aren't educated to anticipate that, and adding an elimination diet into our busy lives is challenging enough, but then getting sick or feeling poorly on top of it is just, like, sometimes what can be the thing that makes them not successful. If we can tell them ahead of time to anticipate that and that it's a normal reaction, that can prevent like them having issues over a weekend and not being able to get in touch with you or messaging you between visits about how they're feeling and wondering if they should proceed. That is more of the like preloaded education that we can provide for our patients so that they can be successful and really know what to expect and how to respond. I would say the next one is patients slipping up and then not knowing what to do after that. And when we talk about the half-life of food and how long an elimination diet should last, if somebody gets several weeks in and adds the food back in prematurely, particularly if it's a complex food like birthday cake, if we stay with that analogy, it has lots of ingredients in it, we need to kind of reset the clock for those. That can be really frustrating. And now a quick word about our sponsor, the Institute for Functional Nursing. IFN is the leading education and community platform for nurses bringing functional medicine into their practice. IFN offers everything from short, on-demand contact hour courses to the full functional nursing program, designed specifically for nurses and nurse practitioners ready to practice root cause, whole person care. If you're looking for connection and real-time learning, the Functional Nursing membership includes 4 live meetings every month where we cover case studies and have open discussions and connection. Come be a part of a movement that's redefining what it means to be a nurse. Visit fxnursing.com to learn more and join us. And now back to today's episode. One of the things I think is most helpful here is making sure that patients know in advance the importance of no exposure for that time, and that if they do have an exposure, it resets the clock. And more times than not, I have had patients come back and say, oh, I did have this, the other day, and oh my gosh. And the good thing about those slip ups is they really reinforce that we're on the right track, because most of the time what happens there is they feel poorly, and it really reinforces that what they're doing is working and that they do have a reaction to a lot of the foods they're consuming, and that there's something that we need to address there. That is definitely high on my list, is making sure that they know in advance that slip ups are going to kind of reset the clock so that they understand that it might not be worth it to, like, quote unquote cheat on their elimination diet food plan. I think another big one is like overwhelming the reintroduction phase or not doing that correctly and reintroducing foods when they already have something going on that kind of mimics the issue. An example of this that I cannot believe how many times I've encountered is patients have a viral upper respiratory infection going around the house, or they have small children that are going to daycare and bringing home bugs. And right when they have done all this work and they have done their elimination diet, they've been successful, they're feeling really well, they're ready to start reintroducing one food at a time and figure out which one is the problem for them. They get a stuffy nose, congestion, headache, some of the symptoms that we can see from food reactions, but also that we could see if they were having a viral respiratory illness or something else going on that they picked up. I can't, I honestly like am really surprised, like, how many times patients will reintroduce foods while that's already occurring, or reintroduce a food and have that occur, like, simultaneously. Making certain that they have a touch point with you before the day that they're gonna start reintroducing foods, and you can kind of review what the plan's gonna be and how to approach any setbacks, what can set them up for success with reintroduction so that they really are able to do it successfully and get some important information out of that process because it's a really key component of the elimination diet. Another thing that I think is really important is the misconception that, like, we're eliminating foods that are hurting the body and they can never be eaten again. That is not the case. The elimination diet is the starting point. We're identifying foods that caused a problem, but the fact that they caused the problem isn't the actual issue. It's the fact that they got in to cause the problem. That being said, a lot of patients will feel like they've eliminated foods, they feel better, and they just want to stay put with, like, okay, I've never felt this good, or it's been years since I felt this good. I do not want to add foods back in. And we don't want to have people on a restrictive diet long term. We want to do the reintroduction phase in a way that will safely inform them of what foods might be causing an issue for them. But regardless of the fact that the food caused an issue for them, there's definitely potential that they can add it back in later once we have done some work to address the gut and heal the barrier there that was letting that food get through in a way that was causing issues. And I think that one, we don't want elimination diets to feel like they're forever. They are not intended to be forever whatsoever. They're very short term. I think that's one of the great things about it. And a way to frame it for patients is that this is a short term objective that we have. All of that tying into number 7 being forgetting to support the gut, that the elimination diet isn't the end of the story. It isn't truly, like, the food sensitivity is not the root cause. It's contributing, it's causing symptoms, but it occurred because there's some work to do on the gut. A lot of people will do the elimination diet, but not add in the layers to restore the gut lining and to address any upstream causes. Something caused that to happen in the first place. And that's like the functional nursing approach, is to identify what actually caused that to happen in the first place and then remove it, do the 5 R's, figure out what was at the root of the health concern in the first place. We want to address that, get rid of it whenever we can, heal it when we can, set the body up for success as much as possible to prevent it from happening again in the future. And the elimination diet is like step 1 of something that, where we have this really critical step of, like, actually doing the gut healing repair work. I like to remind nurses that, like, food reactions, like adding a food back in and getting symptoms really pretty quickly, typically, is confirmation that we have work to do on the gut. Like it is evidence that there's definitely a food reaction. Something was getting through that shouldn't have. We have some work to do on the gut. It is only the first step. It is not the intervention, even though it is the gold standard. Like we are not using the food sensitivity testing that people are buying online. I do not recommend people use those in their practice. And I could go on a whole rant about that, but that's a different story. If you aren't familiar with elimination diets or you're really curious about this, we have an food reactions course at IFN where I teach this really thoroughly and how to work with patients and use elimination diets in your practice. We also have it in the full program in our gut health module in the first semester. If you're curious about this and you aren't like fully in the know with elimination diets yet, it is a really powerful tool. It gets patients incredible results when they have gut issues and food sensitivities. I can't recommend it more when it's appropriate, but of course, there are a lot of caveats to who it's best for, who shouldn't go through one, or how to support people that have special considerations. That is a different rabbit hole, but I think that a lot of people are aware it's a useful tool, but not aware of like the small details that can make a big difference for patients. I hope that like those 7 tips or insights were useful for you. If you're listening to this in January, I wanted to remind everybody that we have $500 off tuition for our cohort that is starting March 2nd. If you were thinking about joining us in the functional nursing program, now is the time to get signed up and get ready to get started with us. I am so excited. We're building the program and it is going really well, and the students in the membership are having a great time. I couldn't be more happy about how things have been going with everything at IFN, and I would love to have you join us if you haven't already. And I hope that these pearls were useful for you. And until next time, be well. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Nurse Podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps other nurses find this movement. To learn more about our programs and join the community at IFN, visit fxnursing.com. Together, we're not just rethinking healthcare, we are rebuilding it from the inside out.